Everyone, and I'll say good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where in the world you are joining us from today. So welcome to this first of the three-part interactive online series organised by the Interfaith Liaison Committee to the UNFCCC. My name is Faith Biddle and I work for FWCC, which stands for Friends World Committee for Consultation. And we're a Quaker world body. We bring fellowship to all the Quakers around the world, and I'm facilitating the conversation today. Before I begin, I want to just go over a few technical points. So we are all joining with different accents, and I smile especially at this point because I have to remind myself to speak especially slowly. But we will be going into breakout rooms later on, so we encourage you to be aware of your own accent and speak slowly. Valerian from the Barracumaris is hosting the technical support for us today, so thank you, Valerian. And if you do have any technical questions, do pop that in the chat to her. We encourage you to change your Zoom name, so that helps to people to show where we're joining from in the world or your organisation. And you can do so by pressing the three little dots in the top of the corner of your face. Please note that we're also recording today's session for those that are unable to join us in person in our Zoom room. And if you're uncomfortable with that in any way, do feel free to turn your camera off, although we encourage you to leave it on so we can see your faces and feel like we're all here together. So before I go on to introduce our four speakers for today, I want to help kind of settle us all into this space and remind us of why we are all in our Zoom room together. This is especially important because in this format, we might be coming even 5 minutes ago from having breakfast or dinner with our family, having a different kind of conversation. And although we are not in a physical space, it's important to remember and settle here together. And why are we here? Well, this is when COP26 should have been happening in Glasgow. And of course, I don't need to remind you that COVID-19 has turned our world into a topsy-turvy place. And we've lost loved ones, our lives have changed drastically. And of course, COP26 was postponed. I'm sure I don't need to go on anymore. But as an interfaith group, so the Interfaith Liaison Committee, who I said we were part of that UNFCCC, it felt too important to lose this space. Our interfaith climate conversations are part of really spurring us on to do the work that maybe we do predominantly individually. And so we decided we have the ability to gather, so let's use this. And that's partly why you will see so many of our faces today. We're not choosing to do this in a webinar format. We're here together because it's important that we speak together later on. So today it's the first of a three-part series where we're marking this space, and today we'll be exploring the world that we want. What does this mean? It means we're offering a space to explore the response offered by different faiths in our current climate crisis and COVID-19. And to do that and help us spur us on, we'll be welcomed and inspired, I'm sure, by four speakers. We've got James Bhagawan, Mohammed Mohidin, Lisa Zogib, and Iyad Abumugli. And my pronunciation is not as beautiful as they would say their names, so forgive me. But of course, you're here too. And we want to hear from you about the world that you also want. So after we've heard from our four speakers, we will go into breakout rooms where we will prompt you with a question about the world that you want from your faith perspective. But to help us and inspire us, I'll introduce the four speakers just before they talk. And first of all, we'll hear from James. Let me tell you a little bit about James. So James is the General Secretary of the Pacific Conference of Churches. the peak ecumenical body of the Pacific, whose membership accounts for approximately 80% of the Pacific population. Forgive me, it's quite a hard word to say apparently. With 30 member churches and 9 council churches all across the region. So James, would you like to talk to us a little bit about the world that you want?
Thank you so much, Faith. And I will begin by saying good evening. It's a little after 9 p.m. Fiji time. So very good evening to you all, or good morning, good day, wherever you are. I'd like to begin perhaps by the way that we do in our traditional Indigenous Pacific way, is acknowledging where I am, and a moment for all of us to acknowledge the land that we are a part of, the people that we are a part of, the communities that we belong, and the ancestors whose journeys have brought us to this place and this time. And I also, being based in Fiji, greet you with 2 very simple words in the indigenous Fijian language, which is what we use to greet each other. And those words are Bula Vinaka. Bula Vinaka. So if you could just, let's all just put our mics on for a moment and say Bula Vinaka. Thank you. So why did I ask you to say Bula Vinaka? One, well, I'd really like to hear all these different people, all of you from all over the world speaking my indigenous language, which is wonderful. But if I can translate for you what that means. So it's not just a greeting of good day or hello, how are you? The word Mbula means life. And the word Vinaka means thankfulness, it means abundance, it means great. So when we say to somebody Bula Vinaka, we are saying, may you have abundant life. And so at this time, when we are challenged by COVID-19, when we continue to struggle amidst the climate crisis, our word Bula Vinaka, may you have life in abundance. And that itself is challenging the dominant narrative that is leading us as we face the climate crisis, where we speak of death and destruction. We choose to speak life, especially when we come from an area that is deeply affected by climate change. So COVID-19 and climate change. What is the world that we want, or the world that we see? I must begin by saying also that COVID-19 has affected the Pacific in very different ways. We have 3 countries or 4 countries that are really affected by COVID-19. Our 2 larger Pacific Island nations of Australia and New Zealand have a large number of cases, and we will hear more about that from our friend from Melbourne. In Guam and Maui Nui, or you may know as French Polynesia, we also have a high number of cases. But for the rest of the Pacific, that is almost COVID-free, save a few cases in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, the impact of COVID-19 has been around the lockdown, the closing of borders. And that was done, of course, to protect our Pacific Island countries. We were the last region to be affected by COVID-19. But that has seriously hampered our tourism industry, which is what is the mainstay for many of our Pacific Island countries. And so our economies have really struggled. But what we have seen as a result is something that we have seen in many other places. People returning to what is really important in their lives. We've seen a resurgence of spirituality, a focus on family, thanks and giving thanks for the simple things in life, thanks for community, and we give thanks for technology that can bring us together online when we're isolated. But we've also seen people returning to the land, people from urban areas, for whatever reason, returning back to their traditional communities, engaging in subsistence economies to survive. We've seen the resurgence of barter systems where people are not, do not have cash to survive. And we've seen what we call in Fiji, sole solevaki, and that in English translates as social capital, or people coming together as community and working together as a community. And this has been very important for our Pacific Island countries because it's a reminder of the value of our indigenous knowledge and traditions, our indigenous spirituality, and ways in which we are able to come together as community, to go back to nature and remember what the earth and the sea provides us. And so this is quite important when we talk about the new normal, because for us, what we've seen is not a new normal, but from a Christian perspective, it is a return to an old normal, a return to the original normal, perhaps we can say, the kingdom of God. And so while we recognize that there is a real danger that in the focus on COVID, the climate conversation has been pushed to the background, and we still continue to live that experience here in the Pacific with increased weather phenomenons. We're in a La Nina situation. We're expecting a number of Category 5, possibly 6 level cyclones with droughts, with rising sea levels. There is an understanding if we are able to look for an alternative, and COVID has given us an opportunity to glimpse the alternative because people have had to reprioritize what's important. And that is something for us that our message to the world is, let's not rush to get back to the old way, the old normal. Let's not rush to get back into this system that is extractive, that just takes and takes and takes from the environment and leads to destruction and death. Let's use this as an opportunity to reset our world. I think I'll leave it there. After my other sisters and brothers have spoken, I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, James. I'm sure I won't be alone in wanting just a couple of moments to reflect on that. And as I said at the beginning, I'm from a Quaker organisation, FWCC. So we'll take a couple of moments, then I will introduce our next speaker. Thank you. So our next speaker is Mohammed Mohideen, forgive me. And Mohammed is the president of the Islamic Council of Victoria, which is the peak Muslim body representing 200,000 plus Muslims in Victoria and over 19 ethnic communities. He's also the deputy chair of the Faith Communities of Council in Victoria. And he's a microbiologist by profession, which I know, and Mohammed is a great joy. So it really does bring me a great joy to be able to introduce him today. Go ahead, Mohammed. Please do it. Unmute yourself, Mohammed, so we can hear your wonderful words.
Sorry. Sorry. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Good morning to the Northern Hemisphere people, and good evening to those in our Pacific region. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we meet on and pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and all the other elders present here. The land of the Aboriginal people will always belong to them, and we acknowledge and cherish their 60,000-year heritage and culture. I would like to thank the organizers for giving us this opportunity to talk a little about Australia and how we have dealt with the COVID virus. Where do we begin? Australia as a continent in the last year has gone through drought, floods, bushfires, and now we have the pandemic. So the bushfires across the nation saw many lives and homes lost. The damage to the ecosystem and the toll it took on the flora and fauna was horrendous. In my 32 years in Australia, I've never seen such disaster. I'm originally from Sri Lanka, so I migrated 32 years ago. But out of this disaster, we also saw the love and compassion showed by the Australian people. The spirit of Australia was very evident. People young and old rallied around one another, irrespective of faith, culture, or ethnicity, to support each other, be it offering shelter, food, or just being there for one another, to hold hands, or simple hug, or just listen to say, we are with you. Could this have been avoided? Could we have taken better care of our land, which we have caused damage, in order to advance civilization and also find room for an ever-increasing population? Are needs getting to a stage that the environment and the damage we do is forgotten? We could answer yes to all, but we also need to appreciate that there are thousands, especially among the young, who are trying to curb this rape of Mother Nature. Do we as faith communities have a role to play? And yes, certainly. This is unanimous, I think, across all faiths. We can continue to advocate on these issues and use our voices and influence to change policy and practice. I'm going to stop on this at this stage because I know there's another session on climate change and other aspects. I'm not going to deal with what's in front of us. This year we saw the emergence of the COVID pandemic. Today, with modern ease of travel, and as we say, a smaller world, the spread of the disease took many by surprise. People are still coming to terms with the concept that this tiny particle could cause such havoc and destruction. The current infections today, I just had a look at WHO's site, it says 41 million people have been infected and 1.3 million deaths, and still rising. We are seeing new waves of infection across the world. Governments are grappling between economic consequences and the loss of life. In Australia, we have been very fortunate. The swift action by the governments, especially the state governments, to lead by example and consider the health aspects first over the economic impact. As of today, we have had 27,000 odd cases and 25,000 odd have recovered, and we have only had 905 deaths. Compared to the rest of the world, we have done well. And also we have gone through winter with less impact. In my state of Victoria, which is close to my heart, which you would have heard was in lockdown for over 100 days since July, when a second wave hit us. In total, we had, unfortunately, 800 odd deaths, mainly in the aged care facilities. And currently, by the action taken by the government and the people working collaboratively, we only have 42 cases from a total of 20,000 odd. And over the last 2 days, we have recorded 0 new cases and 0 deaths. The state government, I must say, considered lives over economy. In Islam, we believe that life is sacrosanct over all other matters. Saving lives is paramount compared to any hardship that we may face. By that, what we mean is we live to do good another day is the philosophy. Life is precious. Although we might not be happy with the lockdowns, which has not only affected freedom of movement, but also to a certain extent the liberty. Although the lockdown was hard, the impact on the social and economic aspects severe. We have seen, unfortunately, the rise in mental health problems due to the isolation, family violence, loss of income and employment. As Victorians, we understood people come first, and we had to undergo this hardship to contain the virus and recover. Fear can also cause people to find an outlet to blame someone. And unfortunately, we have seen incidents of racism, including anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. The good thing is many of us have said no to such ugliness, and faith leaders and communities stood side by side and denounced such behavior. One of the key things that affected us was the closure of places of worship during these lockdowns, and it caused a lot of hardship. In Australia, in the last census, 61% of people claim to follow a faith. For us, faith is nourishment to the heart and well-being of the soul for many. In these dark times of lockdown and isolation, many people are seeking comfort in their faith. There's been an uptake of the general public on various online sessions, and it shows the need for that physical and emotional contact. Places of worship, which we believe are not just places where people gather to pray. It's a place for the community and caring. Just for persons to be able to enter a church, a synagogue, temple, light a candle, self-reflect, or pray on their own. We lost it. For Muslims, it has been worse. We've not had Friday prayers since February. That's compulsory for all of us, but unfortunately, we had to sacrifice. Many religious festivals have come and gone, and we've been unable to celebrate them with our community, and there's been sadness. Having said all this, I'm a very optimistic person, and I eternally look for the silver lining. Out of this pandemic has come out a strong sense of unity and camaraderie. Faith communities have come together to support one another and stand by each other. Help and support by churches, synagogues, mosques, temples are not only to their community members, but across all communities. Faith leaders are working more together to be seen as one voice than different voices in order to raise our concerns with government and to seek support and openings of places of worship. I believe the Australian spirit of a fair go and resilient nature of the people will kickstart now that we have relaxation of restrictions. I believe we'll be richer from this experience and also appreciate our places of worship, community partnerships, and also the surroundings. Next year, as we say in Islam, inshallah, we will have a better and grander festivals in our places of worship. I would like to conclude by saying that we hope and pray that there'll be a change of people's perceptions and recognition of nature and the environment, while also realizing that together we are stronger and a cohesive community, caring for one another and being there for one another without prejudice or gain. Thank you to everyone for listening and the organizers for giving me this opportunity. God bless you all and keep you safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. And I hope I don't speak for everyone, but I definitely speak for myself in saying I felt your optimism all the way from Victoria in my pocket of the world here in London. So thank you. Again, I'm going to leave a couple more moments for us all to digest Mohammed's words and reflect on how maybe it weaves with the words that James shared with us. And then I will introduce our next speaker. So our next wonderful speaker is Lisa Zogib. And Lisa is the founder and co-creator of Diverse Earth, an NGO working for the special interface of nature, culture, and spirit. She is the chair of the IUCN, the specialist group on religion, spirituality, environmental conservation, and climate justice. Lisa is a practitioner and a yoga teacher, among many other things, and a general explorer of moving the body to clear the mind. Lisa, please do share your words with us.
Thank you and good morning. Hello, wherever you are, to everyone. It's so wonderful to be here and to share this time with you. So I have two starting points. Oh, and I think, Faith, that maybe your comment on accents was for me, but I see lots of people have Scottish accents on this thread. So Hello, my Scottish friends. So I have two starting points, that this talk should be personal, and also something that I've been really contemplating on during this strange period of time that we're all going through. And it's something that His Holiness Dalai Lama has said. He says that true change is within, leave the outside as it is. And it seems like such a simple thing, yet because perhaps it's so simple, we don't fully go into it. So let me tell you a little story, personal story. This year, we adopted a little puppy from Spain. Her name is Primrose. She's an Ibethan hound, and she's full of love and life and joy. She was abandoned in a cardboard box at 16 days old and found with her brother and sister, fortunately, and taken to an association. And apparently every year in Spain, an estimated 60 to 80,000 dogs, these hunting dogs, are abandoned, tortured, and killed. And the tradition has it that if a dog isn't hunting well enough, it's a slight on the manhood of the hunter. And therefore, to rectify that slight, they should torture the dog. And so all sorts of atrocities happen. They get shot while they're running away, dragged behind cars, hung from a tree. They say that these dogs are not pets, they're different from other dogs, they're tools for hunting. And I'm thinking, okay, why is this? Because of this disconnect with the animals and these feelings of superiority over the animals. They allow themselves to sustain such violence. And yet they go perhaps to church on a Sunday. I tell this story, and it's not a slight on Spain because this violence is happening all over the place. I tell this story because it's exactly indicative of what's happening in the world. We feel so disconnected with nature, with other species, with other human beings, and we've created such deep-rooted divisions with the other. Is that the reason why we don't see our interconnectedness at all? And as such, we don't feel really, truly responsible for anything. These divisions of race, divisions of species, divisions of religion also, and the biggest one of all, the division between the me and the you. Someone who has deeply inspired me is in his life and works is Sri Jiddu Krishnamurti. And he said something along the very same lines of Dalai Lama. He said, we are the world and the world is us. And that if we could truly see that, not intellectually, but fully, then everything would change. Again, it's very simple, but I don't think we go into it enough. So during my walks with the dog in the forest, every morning, every evening, I've really been trying to think this through deeply, contemplate deeply. Is it that our minds have been so conditioned to think of ourselves as separate from the whole, that we can only feel responsible for our immediate attachments, our little families and neighbors at best? So violence and the division and the conflict arises in the individual psyche. And then logically, it's only at this level, the level of mind, the level of the whole structure of thought that requires transformation. And maybe the rest will follow. So I'm sure you have all meditated, contemplated on why our world is in such chaos. And climate change, the degradation of nature, the loss of biodiversity, all the wars and violence, they're all expressions of that same inner chaos. And we have made that. And so human beings have created the chaos. We are that chaos. And it's a very difficult thing for us to see or to accept, and to hold up a mirror to our own selves and look really closely is a really difficult thing to do. And so what happens is that we try to do something about it, something about the other, something about climate change, something about pollution or whatever it might be, something outside of us. Let's do something about it instead of doing something about us. And I wonder, is this where things are going wrong? Obviously, we turn on the TV, if we have a TV, and we see absolute insanity almost. And so if we think that politicians who themselves are fragmented, corrupt and arrogant will be the ones to make a difference, then we're also deluded. So I think COVID-19 isn't the real crisis here. On the contrary, it's given us potentially some time for deep reflection. And climate change isn't the real crisis. They are both symptoms of a much deeper crisis, the crisis of humanity and of compassion. So it got me to wondering, do we actually have the world that we want? Because we perpetuate it. We feel separate from nature. We feel separate from others. I'm generalizing here. But we're therefore in conflict with nature and in conflict with each other. So it's not surprising to know, and our two previous wonderful speakers have showed us that, you paid respect to the original peoples of the lands that they're in. It's not surprising to know that 80%, more than 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity is on the lands and territories of Indigenous peoples and rural communities. Indigenous communities who, for the most part, still feel that deep and intimate connection with nature. And as such, they feel wholly responsible. So responsible for the whole earth that they're ready to give their lives to protect it. So what can we do? What to do? Can we therefore look very closely at our own minds, our own thoughts, and our own lives, and live completely without division and without conflict? And without division isn't the same as diversity. They're two very different things. And with peaceful minds, free from conflict, therefore whole and therefore holy, can we then be the change we want to see in the world? Thank you.
Thank you. These are beautiful words and very poignant. I was watching the chat flood with lots of comments in agreement and seeing the faces nod along. So thank you. Again, I just want to offer us a couple of moments to digest those words, to maybe sit with that. I think there's truth in the uncomfortableness as well. And maybe again, think about how they pair with Mohammed and James's words before I introduce our final speaker for today. Thank you. So last but not least, our final speaker, who is here to share their words of reflection on the world that we want before we go to reflect in our own breakout rooms, is Dr. Iyad Dr. Iyad Amubogli. Again, my pronunciation is awful, I'm sorry. Iyad is the founder and director of the Faith for Earth initiative. He's more than 35 years experience with international organizations from the private sector, scientific institution. His expertise focus on strategic planning and sustainable development and natural resources management, knowledge and innovation of the interfaith collaboration. He also holds a doctorate in biochemical engineering from the University of Bath and an outstanding graduate of the Virtual Development Academy, Johns University. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce Iyad to share his words with us. Iyad, do take the floor.
Thank you very much, Faith, and thanks to all the inspiring speakers before me, and good morning Greetings of peace to everybody. Well, I will not dwell too much into describing the existential threats the world is facing. It has been proven time and again with scientific evidence that human actions are the determining factors behind the three planetary crises that we are facing. The climate crisis that everybody has been talking about, the nature and biodiversity crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis. Of course, somebody might ask, how about the pandemic crisis? Well, the science says that this pandemic and 75% of the previous ones and more to come are part of the biodiversity crisis due to the imbalance that we humans have created in our ecosystems. The world has responded to the pandemic with immediate, harsh, sometimes, and drastic measures by closing airports, schools, businesses, and other measures that have altered the way we live or we used to live, including, of course, how we perform our spiritual practices. But the international community has failed to take similar measures to deal with the climate pandemic. We are facing these crises because of our greed to use our limited natural resources for our unsustainable immediate wants and not our sustainable needs. Prioritizing nature's conservation and recovery is essential to the health and well-being of the people and the health and sustainability of the planet. This is why investing in nature-based solutions is a moral duty for the entire humanity. But protecting nature is not only about humans. We also have a moral duty to protect every living being on it and conserve their non-living habitats. This is a duty that is integral to every faith and belief system. The solutions to our challenges is embedded in our own behaviors and the set of ethical and spiritual values we live by. Religions teach us to live gently on earth, to fight corruption of its resources. So how can we build a better future or the future we want? While indeed technology, innovation, policies, green economy, sustainable financing, a divestment from environmentally harmful industries and resources, and many other measures are very important and should be pursued by all of us, be it governments or stakeholders, I would like to focus on measures that we can and should do as faith communities. First, faith and religious leaders can influence the behavior of billions of people. A heart-to-heart teaching by a religious leader on a subject matter hits the precise nerve in our brains needed to impact a behavioral change. Religions and beliefs for centuries have influenced what we eat, what we drink, and what we dress. Faith provides a value system that tells us to do good and to avoid evil, follow the right path and avoid the wrong footprints. Environmental sciences, on the other hand, tells us what diet can harm the environment. So science tells us that eating a burger consumes 660 gallons of water, while a bowl of salad consumes only 20 gallons. Similarly, religions encourage us to have a healthy diet based on vegetables and fruits more than on meat and dairy products. Faith and science thus need to work in sync. Our traditional knowledge and practices of living in harmony with nature can be backed up by the scientific evidence on how to use the solar energy, not only to light our homes, but also to dry and preserve our food, fight diseases, and get the necessary vitamins we need for our bodies without introducing harmful chemicals to our ecosystems. Second, harness the economic power of religions. God says in the Holy Quran, and I quote, "God will not change anything in any nation until they change it themselves," end of quote. So faith-based organizations and institutions can lead the change themselves by greening their own assets. Faith-based investment institutions are the fourth largest economic power on the planet. faith-based organizations must divest from fossil fuel and put their wealth into investments that ensures a green and nature positive future. Already over 40 faith-based organizations with over $1 trillion in assets have committed to divestment. But that is not enough. The economic power of faith or faiths turned to responsible investment and green economy can be a major driver of positive change as well as build back better. There are over 100 million houses of worship, be it mosques, churches, temples, and what have you. Green building principles must be applied to reduce the impact of houses of worship in places and those yet to be built, from installing green roofs for natural cooling to switching to renewable energy to recycling waste and water. Third, faith communicates can provide nature-based solutions to socioeconomic challenges. Climate resilience is a term not strange to the faith communities, and there are many examples of how faith communities were the first responders that supported entire villages after the tsunamis in relying on nature-based solutions for better sustainable livelihoods. Many nature-based solutions draw upon traditional knowledge and practices. With a well-developed strategy and a deep understanding of local ecosystems, organizations can contribute to these processes. Nature-based solutions should be employed not only to protect existing ecosystems, but restore previously degraded ones. Fourth, interfaith and multilateralism are our strength. With diversity in religions comes our strength. When we meet for prayers in the houses of worship, we feel a sense of community and belonging. Intra and interfaith collaboration brings out the best each faith can offer and ensures peace and prosperity. Establishing the proposed Faith for Earth Coalition by UNEP will bring faith organizations together and create partnerships with intergovernmental organizations, states, and other stakeholders, a powerful coalition for a sustainable tomorrow. We need a new normal that is inclusive, where the 1 billion people who go to bed every night have food on their table, and that the 30% of food we waste is treated as a resource to be used. We need a future that we can proudly say it is the Ecocene and not the Anthropocene, where humans are the main factors impacting life on Earth. We need a future that not only respects human rights, but also respects the rights of nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iyad. Just wonderfully spoken and such powerful messages there. Again, I really want us to encourage not to rush too quickly, because these are big thoughts that we're thinking about, but also quite simple. But as Lisa showed, they can sometimes also be painful about what they might suggest or request from us. So I'm going to pause for a few moments so we can digest Iyad's words, and then I'll explain what we will next be doing. Thank you, Iyad. Okay, so that's a lot to digest, and so many powerful, hopeful messages about the power of interfaith work and the need for community and the power of community, but also some really hard truths that I'm sure we know, and that's partly what's brought us here together. But still, it's sad to recognize the destruction that exists in the world, partly from our own actions. So this series is about creating a space for us to be together. And it's not just to hear from our wonderful speakers, but it's also a space, as our speakers have shown us, where we can look in on ourselves. So the next part of our session together, we're going to break into breakout rooms, which is a wonderful facility that we can do, which maybe we wouldn't have been able to do if we were together in physical space, because maybe we wouldn't have all been able to be together. So you'll be put into a breakout room with three, so you'll be one of three. And we want you to focus on this question. What is something that has moved you or you are grateful for? And what is one thing that you will change in order to have the world that we want? I will put this question in the chat box. And when you go into the breakout room, I really encourage you to take a bit of time. If you are someone who speaks quickly, maybe pause and encourage someone who might be slightly quieter to speak first. Remember to introduce yourself, where you are from in the world, and speak from the heart. This is a safe space. Although we are recording the whole session, your breakout rooms will be private. Remember, Zoom is a funny world, but it also offers a safe space. You are in your own homes, and they are in theirs. Really dig deep. You'll be in your breakout rooms for around 13 minutes. And when we come back, we will have a chance to share our questions with the speakers. But really use this time to think about what we've heard today and how we think about the world that we want. So again, when you go into the breakout rooms, introduce yourself and say one thing that you are grateful for from the midst of COVID-19, and one thing that you would change in your life in order to create the world that we want. And Valerian, we now do the honors of putting us into breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. We're still waiting for a couple of us, but I can see lots of smiling faces, so I hope that your spaces together were fruitful in some way. Before we go on, I'm going to indulge you in a little bit of a stretch. Just, I know we've been here for about an hour now together, and we've got half an hour where we're going to ask our speakers some questions. But before we do that, I'm going to indulge you again, because I work for the Quaker World Body, a little Quaker stretch that we call. So as much as you're willing and able, do join in, but it goes a little bit like this. So you reach up for high ideals, reach up, yeah, lovely. You go out for outreach, reach out, and you go down for the grassroots. So for those that can touch our toes. And a little bit of rolling shoulders. Wonderful. So it's really hard not to want to get you to all share a little reflection from your breakout rooms, but I'll restrain and ask that you share your reflections with somebody else you know that you're able to see in person, or maybe that you talk to on the phone if you're not seeing people in person at the moment. So I ask that you share your reflections from today with them. Or if you're online, we are using a hashtag, and I'll share that hashtag with you later, and you can share it with them online too. But for now, I want to, while we've got these four wonderful speakers with us, to gather questions. So because we're in Zoom, we'll do that through raising the hand, or the virtual hand. And if you do that by, if you click on participants, you're able to raise your hand. I'm just going to check that that's actually. And if you're not able to raise your hand.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. As all of you know, there was a letter signed by the religious leaders to the officers of the IMF and the World Bank asking cancellation of the debt of the countries suffering of poverty in order to use these funds to deal with the pandemic COVID-19, because there is also lack of food now in many countries and lack of the available medical equipment to deal with the crisis of pandemic. But this is an important initiative, but we have to consider this as a first step. Now, what is the role of the faith communities in our countries to speak to our political leaders, to the members of our national parliaments, and to the local communities in order to support these requests of the letter of the religious leaders around the world for cancellation of the debt of the countries suffering of poverty? I like to ask the members to discuss this, because the first step is useless if we don't take action to convince the people who are responsible for resolutions and implementation. And these are the leaders of the rich countries.
Thank you. James, I might put that one to you. So how do we work within the structures that we've got and interfaith networks that we have? James, do unmute yourself. Well, while James is waiting, Lisa, I can see you're still with us. Would you like to respond to that one while we wait for James?
It's probably beyond my realm of expertise, to be quite honest. So the question is basically how to move this initiative forwards. Is that correct? In terms of faith leaders sitting with political leaders to ensure that this takes place. I think, well, I'm not a religious leader, so I mean, there's very little that I personally can do, but we within IUCN, of course, we have this specialist group on, as you said when you introduced me, and there are many religious leaders within that, and I saw actually this initiative has already been circulated amongst our members. So I think that's the first thing to do in terms of getting the word out, very widely. I would like probably Iyad from UNEP to step in here and see, in terms of his connections at that level, at that higher level, what he would recommend.
Thank you, Lisa. And just before we go to Iyad, I want to humbly disagree with you, because I think that actually something that your words spoke to me was the fact that we are all part of our structures, and if we look inwards, there is a lot more strength to find out with the chaos, and that engaging with the interfaith, we're all part of systems, and we know. So although yeah, sorry, I should have posed that maybe when I was approaching it with you, to put you on the spot in that way. But just to say that maybe that is also our role, to encourage one another, to recognize that we are part of these structures and that we have more power than maybe we think. But Iyad, would you like to take it next?
Thank you very much. And this is an excellent question, and actually music to my ears, because when I founded the the Faith for Earth initiative at the United Nations Environment Program, this was the main goal that we are embarking on. We started 4 years ago, and as you said rightly, these are only first steps. And the entire objective of the initiative, which is a United Nations initiative, and this is unique in the United Nations system, that we have a full program dedicated to integrating faith values and working with faith and religions and faith leaders on environmental issues. Our motto is we have one earth, many religions, but we have one goal. All of us, all religions, whether it is Eastern religions, Western religions, Abrahamic religions, what have you, the message that they all convey to their followers is the protection of nature, and that we are part of this nature and not controlling this nature. We have to work within what God has given us to use but sustain as well. And we have been for the past 4 years engaging with all levels of faith leaders, be it the highest authority like Pope Francis or Sheikh al-Azhar of the Muslims and so on, or the Buddhists and the Brahma Kumaris and all the religions that are known and constitute more than 80% of the population of Earth. But also we have been working at the local level with schools, with faith leaders in churches and so on. Our ultimate objective is to bridge the gap between the highest faith leaders and the local ones. So the wisdom, the messages of the faith leaders on environmental issues are translated into action at all the corners of the world. Wherever you go, anywhere in the world, you would find a priest or an imam or a monk, and those have the power of the religion, the power of speech. People go to them for inspirations. So while we agree that those leaders can lead and have been for centuries leading the behavioral or the behavior of the people in terms of, not lying, not cheating and so on, but also we want them to keep saying not to harm the environment or nature that you are part of. So indeed, this is an important component of what we do. And the most important part is we are bringing religions together. This what makes peace among the people, tolerance. This what moves them and mobilizes them towards one objective that they all agree on. And as I mentioned, we live on one earth, we breathe the same air, we drink the same water, we eat the same food. So why don't we live in harmony with the nature that we have? Thank you.
Thank you, James. And oh, sorry. Yeah. And thank you again for highlighting just the importance of the interfaith networks that we're in and the power. So thank you. And again, so beautifully spoken, very, very clear and articulate. Mohammed, I might not bring this question to you, forgive me, we might ask another question. And I see, Henrik, you've got your hand up, so please do offer your reflection to the floor.
So thank you. And thank you for all the very good inputs from the speakers. It's I'm very happy to see it. I just would like to, if you can give just a kind of short answer, because we often the faith are bringing a narrative to understand where we are as humanity. And in this global pandemic, we need a kind of new narrative, how to not build back to where we were. We want to go for a future. And all those kinds of narratives there are in our different faith traditions. How can they help us to bring us through a sustainable and just future? So from all of you speakers, I would like to hear, what is the number one thing that faith communities can do to move us to build back this future that we haven't seen yet? So what is it? I guess you have some different perspective of it. I was very curious to hear from all of you. What is the number one thing that faith movements can bring to this discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. I'm going to put that to the speakers that we have left, and the order in which I'll ask you to speak is Mohammed, Iyad, and Lisa. So Mohammed, do start.
Thanks, Faith. A simple answer, I think we are going into a COVID normal, which is going to be different to what we were pre-COVID. And I think one of the key messages and key things is coming together, working together, because that voice of faith together is much more powerful than individual faiths putting forward. And like, even with the previous question about poverty, I would say, like in Australia, what we have done is we work together as a faith councils to put forward a message to the government. We have a very powerful voice. It's a very powerful voice. When you talk about faith, it's a very powerful voice. Like in Australia, we have 61% plus who believe in a faith. And that reach out that we have is much stronger than any politician, individual politician. So coming together, working together, I think it's important, and I think we can address poverty. We can bring about changes of policy in government. It is possible, but I think we have to work together. I think we have to stop thinking of our own faiths as individual faiths, come together and work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Iyad.
Well, thank you very much, Henrik, for this wonderful question. My simple answer again is we have to go back to the ethics, the moral responsibility, the spiritual values that we believe in, each one from their own religious perspective. We're not saying that we need to unify our understandings, but we need to mobilize this diversity of understandings of our spiritual responsibility towards nature and bring it together to move forward. And this was exactly the theme of the global conference that we have just concluded as United Nations with the government of Iceland. And we had more than 450 participants with thousands of people watching the live stream. And the essence of the conference for 4 days was, how do we mobilize the spiritual values, the ethical approaches to sustainability and to the Agenda 2030. Because if you remember, we had what we call the Millennium Development Goals before, and it failed, although it worked, and we reduced some of the poverty, we reduced some of the health issues and so on. But it failed because it did not connect the human or the people's importance in the equation with the planet's importance of the people. So there was a disconnect, and it did not employ the cultural values of the people in approaching sustainable development. So I would say what will drive us is our beliefs, our spiritual values, and our moral responsibility.
Thank you, Iyad. Lisa.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for the question. So I think, personally speaking, it is this getting back to looking at the nature of our minds and how the whole structure of thought and thought in relationship, thought in living has its role, and how we can change that. But if we look more practically, so Diverse Earth, my organization, has been doing a Mediterranean-wide study of sacred natural sites. And most of the faith cultures are represented there. And we've been extremely inspired by the custodians of these places. So these are places, it could be a small site protecting one individual tree, for instance. It could be a sacred forest. It could be a place of worship that has management of the surrounding lands, forests, waters, ocean sites also. And we've taken some very simple lessons, but very powerful lessons from those custodians living simply on the land. And those are, if you allow, cherish the earth, cherish the soils and the waters, look to nature, see your place in nature and learn from that. And get your hands there to plant a tree, grow something to eat. Even if you don't have land, you can do it on your balcony. This is what we're seeing more and more, or you can even do it in your apartment. Eat mindfully. They're very simple lessons, but extremely powerful. The question of waste, there is no waste. Everything has a value. Live with the seasons. So very simple things like that. Walk mindfully, walk mindfully. Remember you're connected to everything else. Enjoy silence, breathe deeply, slow down, and basically see the beauty of living simply. And so, yeah, it's sometimes the simplest of things, the simplest of messages that have the most power. So I would say this is our responsibility.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, everyone. We have 10 minutes left together in all of our pockets of the world. So I'm going to go back around with the panelists that we have, and I'm going to ask them to share just a quick summary of what they hope that we take away. And then I'll ask us to share something else. But first, the panelists again, and we'll go with the same order. So Mohammed, Iyad, and Lisa.
Thanks. My message, take-home message is, I think we together, I think the key message is together, irrespective of whatever faith you come of, whatever ethnicity you come from, we can together achieve much more than we can do it alone. And I think we need to believe in each other, we need to share with each other and come together. Thank you.
And from my perspective, I would say practice what I preach. If we go and tell the people to conserve Earth, we have to do it ourselves first. We have to change our attitude. We have to change our practices. And I can tell you from my own faith perspective and from others having worked with all of them, our spiritual practices can be harmful to nature as well. If we think, for example, of Ramadan, which is a month of fasting, it has been proven by the science that we consume in Ramadan 30% more food and waste more during this month of fasting. And Christmas, for example, waste generated by wrapping and packaging and what have you exceeds all other seasons and all other days of the year. So if we believe in something, we cannot use faith to justify our unsustainable behavior. Another thing that I would call everybody is to look at our website and look for Faith for Earth. There are plenty of resources that can help faith leaders and initially or essentially I saw a question in the chat, where are governments and politicians of this? And this is exactly what we're doing. We're bringing those religions and those religious beliefs into the policy making process so that the religious values actually impact the policies that politicians adopt and that can govern and be part of the rule of law. So this is what we're doing, and I hope that you engage in this movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Iyad. Lisa.
I think let's each of us individually look at our own roles in the chaos that we see outside and contemplate very deeply on that, clear our minds, live with clarity, be sane, show sanity in this world that seems like it's going insane. Yeah, and inspire others. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry we haven't been able to hear from James. He's a very busy man. He's left us today. But I really encourage each of you to also think about what your take home would be. So often we hear things that maybe we need to hear or that resonates in a certain kind of way. And there's been so many wonderful things that have been shared, and also quite hard things. These are not easy topics to discuss. And sometimes there's a balance to be struck between being optimistic and also really listening to the truth. And I hope that's what we've been able to allow you all to think about today in the first of this 3-part series of when COP26 should have been happening. We felt as an interfaith group, it was too much of a space to miss. And so we've carved out the space to begin this conversation, but we encourage you to take the conversation elsewhere. So again, I ask you that those conversations that you had in your breakout room, talk to loved ones, talk to friends, or talk to us online. You can share with the hashtag Faiths Unite for Climate and share on social media. I know that there were some wonderful questions that came in that we didn't get a chance to ask, so maybe ask those to the friends online as well. And the next series we have is on next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. So that's the 3rd and the 10th of November. Tell your friends and also come along. It'll be lovely to see your faces. And thank you so much for those of you that were able to keep your cameras on. It really makes a difference to be able to see all of us in our pockets of the world. And again, because I'm from a Quaker perspective, I'm going to ask that we close with a few moments of silence, thanking particularly all of our speakers and the wonderful organisers. I'm not saying that to myself, or the people that are behind the scenes that have maybe enabled you to even be aware that you were here and that the event could happen. So thank you to all of you. You know who you are. And lastly, I want to say thank you to you. Thank you for being present, for listening to some of the uncomfortable truths. And I look forward to seeing where it takes us. And I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll finish with a few moments of silence. Thank you, everyone. I do encourage you to unmute yourselves to say goodbye so we get a chance to hear from your voices again.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.